At the outset, I would like to thank the Department of Indian History of the University of Madras for inviting me to deliver the Professor A. Karunanandan Endowment lecture on Buddhism and scientific temper. I suppose all of you know, the students, what scientific temper means. The synonyms for scientific temper are scientific mindset, rational thinking, critical thinking. How do you know if you have scientific temper? If while listening to my speech, you are not shocked at all, then you have scientific temper. If you are shocked at some points, that means you are not fully scientific in your mindset. Ladies and gentlemen, we humans belong to the species Homo sapiens, where the word sapiens means the wise. But most human beings are anything but wise. We are prone to what is called magical thinking. What are the characteristics of magical thinking? 1, we tend to accept things on blind faith without evidence or in spite of evidence. Once I was returning from Delhi, from Terminal 3, when I noticed that the airport was relatively empty. I asked the security check man, why is the airport empty today? He said, sir, today is Tuesday. Most people here don't travel on Tuesdays. And I noticed later that this is true. And so these days I travel only on Tuesdays. I have my haircuts only on Tuesdays. I do my shopping only on Tuesdays because I find things are much freer that time. And you also know that many people believe that the number 13 is unlucky, especially in the West. Many hotels don't have the 13th floor at all. After 12th floor, it goes to 14th floor. Now, what is the connection between 13 being unlucky or Tuesday being unlucky? There is no connection at all. People have simply accepted it on blind faith. Another aspect of magical thinking is that we tend to believe in weird superstitions and other phantoms of the mind. For example, Aishwarya Rai, the noted Bollywood actress, was supposed to have Mangala Dosham. Women with Mangala Dosham don't get married very easily. But because she had a lot of money and she was a famous person, you know how the astrologers found a way out? They first married her to a banana tree and then married her to Abhishek Bachchan. So that is the easy way around to get over the Mangal Dosham. There is an IPL team here in India. I don't want to name it or name the owner. The owner is supposed to be so superstitious that when the team plays, certain number of people are supposed to wear a particular color of dress and sit in particular seats and not get up for those 3 hours. They're supposed to sit in the same seats because they think only then the team will win. Now, obviously, this is a superstition. It can't be true. The third aspect of magical thinking is we tend to jump to supernatural explanations before ruling out natural explanations. There is a scientific principle called Occam's razor. I don't know how many of you have heard of it. It says, if there are one or more explanations which fit all the facts, then the simplest explanation must be the correct one. But of course, the explanations must fit all the facts. For example, if a magician is pulling a rabbit out of a hat, you think he's got supernatural powers or is he playing a trick? Most people will say he's playing a trick. But when a godman produces a vibhuti or a chain or a watch by waving his hand, many people think it is a miraculous feat. Could be, but before you jump to that, you should first rule out trickery. I don't know to name the godman. He once gave a memento to a chief minister of a state, and soon after he waved his hand and gave him a gold chain. But the whole event was being videographed, and the video showed that the gold chain was actually pasted under the memento, and while giving the memento to the chief minister, he took out the gold chain and pretended as he was created it out of nothing. I remember that when I was in school, a blindfolded motorcyclist, he told the headmaster, ask your students to sit anywhere on the ground and you stand anywhere, I will ride the motorcycle without knocking any student down, and I will stop exactly where you are. And he did it, he was blindfolded, but still he could ride the motorcycle. The entire school erupted in this one. We all thought this, either a lot of people said he has magical powers, he must be having X-ray vision. That's of course you know that it is nonsense. I finally found out how this trick is done when I was district collector of Viluppuram. Because as district collector of Viluppuram, I used to get some funds every year to conduct what is called a summer festival in Kalrayan Hills. And there used to be a whole day program. I thought for a change, let me call a magician from Chennai. And one of his programs was riding a motorcycle blindfolded, So I thought this is my opportunity to find out how this fellow is doing this trick. And so I had kept that program late, it's around 4:30. So the chap came up to me and said, "Sir, konja sigra panna nallade, irrittaittu irukku." I said, "Nee kannu mudittu odravanukku irrittana enna aache?" So then I knew that there's a trick, so I thought I must watch it very carefully. So then I found out how he's doing it, the blindfolded trick. That's what everybody does. என்ன பண்ணுறானுக்கு ஒரு மாவு மாதிரி ஒரு 2 ரெக்டாங்குலர் பீசஸ் கண்ணில் இப்படி வைக்கிறான். அதுக்கு மேலே 2 காயின், இந்த கண்ணில் ஒரு காயின், இந்த கண்ணில் அந்த மாவு மேலே ஒரு காயின், அப்புறம் இன்னொரு மாவு அந்த ரெக்டாங்குலர் ஷேப். Then he ties it with a cloth around his back. And then he puts a hood, black there. But the hood is not opaque, it is translucent, you can easily see. இவன் என்ன பண்ணுறான், அந்த ஹுட்டு போடுற டைமில் இதை இப்படி மேலே தூக்கிடுறான். தட் இஸ் தட் திங் பிகம்ஸ் லைக் கண்ணாடி மாதிரி இருக்குது, அதை மேலே தூக்கிடுறான். ஸோ தட் ஹீ இஸ் ஆக்சுவலி சீயிங் வித் இஸ் ஐஸ் த்ரூ த டிரான்ஸ்லூசன்ட் இது. பிகாஸ் நான் அவங்க பக்கத்தில் இருந்து பார்த்தனால நான் பார்த்தேன், எனக்கு தெரியும்னு காட்டிக்கிறதுக்கு அவனோட தலை இங்கே சும்மா விரல் எப்படி தட்டினேன். So this is how the things are done. The point I'm trying to say is, before we jump to supernatural or miraculous explanations, we should first rule out trickery. We should first rule out simpler explanations. But most people don't do that. They straight away jump to miraculous explanations. Magical thinking is the default human condition. It is deeply ingrained in human psyche due to both evolution and culture. It is magical thinking that makes people believe in astrology, Nadi Josiam, palmistry, numerology, nameology. The stupid science where people think by changing the spelling of their name, their luck will change. Tarot cards, Vastu Shastra, Feng Shui, crystal power, channeling, good luck charms, evil eye, power of curses, ghosts, demonic possession, homeopathy, miracle cures, creating objects out of nothing, vaccine hesitancy, climate change denial, evolution denial, and the like. Don't be shocked if this list contains some items that you passionately believe in. I myself believed in some of them many years back. They are all scientifically false. Belief in them is widespread, even among the educated sections of the society. Magical thinking is not always harmless fun. Sometimes it can be positively dangerous and entail loss of money or even loss of life. This problem is particularly serious in India. Almost every day, we read in the newspapers about the most appalling instances of horror and stupidity committed by some persons on account of irrationality and blind beliefs. I would like to show you some slides. Even in this day and age, there are people conducting human sacrifices in India. It's not some random guys. A lot of guys are doing it. Not all the cases are getting reported. I don't know if in history we are told that the ancient Aztecs of Mexico used to conduct human sacrifices. Usually they used to sacrifice young girls because they believed that they didn't conduct the sacrifice, the sun won't rise. I don't know who came up with this stupid idea. But periodically the Aztecs used to conduct human sacrifices for about 200 years until they were conquered by the Spaniards. Now in India, as you can see, and these things have happened not just in the backward state. The first one was in Assam, and all this happened in the last 1 or 2 years. The second was in Delhi. The third on the top was in Punjab. The fourth was in Kerala. The fifth is in Tamil Nadu. The last one is in Tamil Nadu. And the chart tells you how many human sacrifices have happened in India. Now this is dangerous. Usually some tantric tells the fellow, if you want to become rich, commit a human sacrifice of a child. Or if you want a male child, commit a human sacrifice. I mean, these are all stupid things, but some people believe them. The next one is witches, witch hunting. Now, you must have read in history that between the 14th and 18th centuries, witch hunting was a craze in Europe. About 1 lakh people were killed as witches, and 80% of them were women. But in India, even now, we have this problem of witch hunting, especially in the backward tribal states like Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and places like that. I mean, if there is a drought, or some people fall sick in the village, or 2 or 3 deaths happen in a row, some fellow says this is because of the presence of a witch. They pick some random woman and they kill her or beat her up. The third is very funny, rain-making rituals. On the extreme left is what is called Varuna Yajna. People sit in barrels of water and chant Lord Varuna's name 1,000 times and they think rain will come. Obviously, rain is not going to come. The funny thing is frog marriages. It is happening all over India. People conduct a marriage of 2 frogs, and that is supposed to bring rain. The third is children are covered with mud and made to lie on the floor. They think rain will come. On the left, there's a particular superstition in Telangana state where people of the villages go on a temporary exile to forest for 1 or 2 days and they think rain will come. In UP, there is a superstition think that if women plow the field naked in the night, rain will come. And on the last one, if young children go around begging naked, rain will come. Now, these are all extremely silly superstitions, but a lot of people still believe in them and things are happening like this. Now, these are all news items that you must have read. 50 people looking for solar image of Mary lose sight in Kerala. I mean, they thought Virgin Mary was going to come and they looked at the sun and 50 people lost their eyesight. Indian baby tossing ceremony may be banned. This is in a village called Solapur or something in Maharashtra. This is a peculiarly Muslim superstition where a newborn child is dropped from a height of 50 feet. Of course, there are people below holding a cloth. But why should you do that? It is too risky. Another superstition, devotee pulls out eye to fulfill vow to God. Then Maharashtra man sets wife on fire for giving birth to girl for 3rd time. I mean, people who know science know that male chromosome has X and Y, and a female chromosome is X and X. So it is the man who is responsible. If you are not getting a male child, it is the husband who is responsible, not the wife. But many people don't know this. They divorce their wives, they beat up their wives, and sometimes they even kill their wives, thinking that the wife has not been able to produce the male child. I would blame India's intellectuals, especially scientists, for this sorry state of affairs. They have failed to discharge their responsibility of challenging the various superstitious beliefs and pseudo-sciences directly and forcefully. They have not taken pains to educate the lay public about the dangers of irrationality and blind beliefs. They often adopt an attitude of detached disgust and refuse to do battle with their purveyors. As the American writer H.L. Mencken put it, the way to deal with superstition, H.L. Mencken said, the way to deal with superstition is not to be polite to it, but to tackle it with all arms, and thereby rout it, cripple it, and make it forever infamous and ridiculous. Is it perchance cherished by persons who should know better? Then their folly should be brought out into the light of the day and exhibited there in all its hideousness until they flee from it, hiding their heads in shame. It is pertinent to point out here that Tandai Periyar followed this policy of confrontation exactly as suggested by H.L. Mencken in his fight against caste inequalities and other social evils in Tamil Nadu. So did Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. India's intellectuals have a duty to stem the rising tide of irrationalism and obscurantism in the country. They should directly confront and forcefully debunk the various superstitions and pseudo-sciences. You may have noticed that most Indians lead a kind of double life. While they enjoy the material benefits of the 21st century science and technology, their minds are still ruled by obscurantist ideas of the 11th century or the 1st century. They respect the fruits of science, but they have failed to imbibe its spirit. That is, they have failed to acquire a scientific mindset or scientific temper. What is scientific temper? Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru coined the term scientific temper in his book, The Discovery of India, in 1946. He wrote, "The application of science are inevitable and unavoidable for all countries and people today, but something more than application is necessary. It is the scientific approach, the adventurous and yet critical temper of science, the search for truth and new knowledge, the refusal to accept anything without testing in trial, the capacity to change previous conclusions in the face of new evidence, the reliance on observed fact and not on preconceived theory, the hard discipline of the mind. All this is necessary, not merely for the application of science, but for life itself and the solution of its many problems. The scientific approach and temper are or should be a way of life, a process of thinking, a method of acting and associating with our fellow men. We live in a scientific age, so we are told, but there is little evidence of this temper in the people anywhere or even in the leaders." Now, this is a long quote. Let me explain it in simpler terms. Science is not just about facts, theories, laws, problems, and gadgets, as most people seem to think. As Jawaharlal Nehru said, science is a way of thinking more than it's a body of knowledge. Science follows a structured process of observation, hypothesis, formulation, rigorous testing, and experiment and refinement. It tests its conclusions on observable, measurable, and replicable evidence. It encourages peer review and scrutiny to ensure validity and transparency. Supposing you notice that plants in the sunlight are growing taller and plants in the shade are not growing very tall. So you propose a hypothesis. The hypothesis is plants grow faster in sunlight than in the shade. So if you're conducting the experiment, you have to do with the same type of plant, many pots in the sunlight, many pots in the shade, many pots partly in the sunlight, partly in the shade. You have to actually measure the growth, and if your hypothesis is true, then the thing stands proved. Another hypothesis could be that cow urine cures cancer. I mean, don't laugh at it. Scientists never rule out anything out totally. There are more than 200 types of cancer, so you have to conduct the experiment. If it cures, fine. If it doesn't cure, then you have to discard the hypothesis. Science generates precise and reliable predictions that can be tested. I suppose you are aware that astronomers noticed that there was some wobbling in the orbit of Saturn. So they knew that there must be a planet beyond Saturn, and that's how Uranus was discovered. Then they found that there was a wobble in the orbit of Uranus also. So they knew there must be one more planet beyond Uranus, and that's how Neptune was discovered. And they found there's a wobble in the orbit of Neptune also. So they knew there was one more planet beyond Neptune, that's how Pluto was discovered. But all this while, astrologers didn't know about any of these planets. Even today, they don't take Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and all the other celestial bodies into account. Science aligns with well-established knowledge and integrates new evidence logically. For example, After Darwin came out with his theory of evolution, new disciplines like genetics, paleontology was not exactly new, but paleontology, the science of fossils, and molecular biology came up, but they are all found to support and not oppose Darwin's theory of evolution. Science adapts and evolves when new evidence contradicts existing theories. For example, Newton's mechanics holds good for low speeds. When the speeds are very high, for example, when the speeds are close to the velocity of light, then, as you know, as per Einstein's theory of relativity, length contracts, mass increases, and so many things happen. So, this doesn't mean that Newton's mechanics was wrong. It has only been refined. Science believes in finding natural explanations for things. It believes in the orderly working of nature, governed by a set of laws that are indifferent to human passions, desires, and prayers. Science doesn't believe in the supernatural or miracles, or simply ignores them. Science does not take the claims of anyone, however highly placed or revered, for granted. It believes in the critical examination of all such claims in the light of existing knowledge, in debating them openly and freely, in subjecting them to experimentation or other modes of verification in order to validate their truth, and in persuading opponents by strength of evidence. Science is a democratic and egalitarian enterprise. It holds that the book of nature is open to anyone who wishes to study it and unravel its secrets. There is no priesthood in science. Science is an international enterprise and a unifying force. Many scientific publications have co-authors from different countries, and many of the biggest scientific achievements come from international collaborations. The Manhattan Project to develop the atom bomb, the Human Genome Project, development of vaccines for COVID-19 pandemic, etc. Now, in this same book, Discovery of Science, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru also wrote about the method of religion. He said, "Very different is the method of religion, concerned as it is principally with the regions beyond the reach of objective inquiry. It relies on emotion and intuition. And then it applies this method to everything in life, even to those things which are capable of intellectual inquiry and observation. Organized religion, allying itself to theology and often more concerned with its vested interests than with things of the spirit, encourages a temper which is the very opposite to that of science. It produces narrowness and intolerance, credulity and superstition, emotionalism and irrationalism. It tends to close and limit the mind of man and to produce a temper or a dependent, unfree person." Every organized religion has two components. One, a moral component: don't lie, don't steal, don't kill, don't commit adultery, and the like, which is based on rational thinking and is broadly common to all religions. And two, a dogmatic component, which is the set of authoritative beliefs and practices that are considered unquestionable and immutable truths. The dogmatic component holds that a full understanding of the world can be gained only through direct revelation from God, which requires devotion, meditation, and prayer. It believes that God has already revealed whatever is necessary for mankind to know. It discourages critical examination and experimental verification of the points or claims made in the scriptures. It tries to persuade opponents by coercion and terror where arguments fail to achieve the desired goal. Religion is non-egalitarian and has a system of priesthood. The dogmatic component is based on magical thinking and varies considerably from one organized religion to another. Science has no problems. Science has problems not with the rational component, the moral component, but only with the dogmatic component of organized religions, because scientific thinking and magical thinking are fundamentally incompatible. A caveat is in order here. There are some honorable exceptions to the general comment about organized religions made above, Buddhism being a case in point, but more about this later. Science also has problems with superstitions and pseudo-sciences because the latter are also based on magical thinking. Now, the following cartoons illustrate the key differences between scientific thinking and magical thinking, that is, between the method of science and the method of religion, or other faith-based notions like superstition and pseudo-sciences. You can see the flow chart for science. You start, you have an idea or a hypothesis, you perform an experiment. Does the evidence support the idea? Yeah, no, bad idea. Yes, you make a theory. Basing on the theory, you predict some things, conduct more experiments. So that's how it goes. Whereas religion or superstition, you start, you get an idea, ignore all contradictory evidence, and keep the idea forever. A scientist has to read endless number of books. In religion, you just have to read 1 or 2 books, and you don't go beyond that. And the next cartoon is a brief history of religion. I just want you to read it yourself. Now, don't make the mistake of thinking that just because someone has a science degree, he must be having a scientific temper. His science degree simply means that he had once learnt by rote memory a large mass of scientific facts, most of which he has probably forgotten. That's why in India, we have a peculiar situation where high science coexists with high superstition. Many a physics lecturer teaches the scientific theory of solar and lunar eclipses in the classroom, but still clings to his belief in Rahu and Ketu, the imaginary demons which are supposed to devour the sun and the moon during eclipses. Many a chemistry lecturer teaches the scientific law of conservation of mass and energy in the classroom, which states that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed, but only transformed from one form to another, but is prepared to believe that a certain God-man can create something out of nothing. The director of IIT Mandi in Himachal Pradesh, you must have read in the papers recently about this chap, said recently that landslides in Himachal Pradesh occurred because people ate meat, and that he had once exorcised ghosts from the house of a friend. Now, imagine the director of our IITs of this caliber, then you wonder what's going to happen to the IIT. For such persons, science is just a vocation, a source of income. It has not permeated their thinking or become a way of life for them. Again, don't make the mistake of thinking that just because someone is highly educated or holding a high post or successful in life, he must be a rational thinker. On the contrary, many such persons may be very superstitious and active purveyors of pseudo-scientific nonsense. In fact, it said, an educated fool is more dangerous than an uneducated fool. In 2021, a sitting judge of the Allahabad High Court, as part of his judgment, mind you, he didn't say it orally, it's part of his judgment. He said that the cow is the only animal which breathes in and breathes out oxygen. Imagine the level of science knowledge of this High Court judge. And he said, cow ghee, using cow ghee in yajna gives special energy to sun rays which causes rain. Sun gives energy to everybody. This fellow thinks that, the yajna gives energy to the sun and that causes rain. And that panchagavya, which is a mixture of cow milk, ghee, curd, urine and dung, helps in the treatment of several incurable diseases. I don't know how it can, by definition, incurable diseases can't be treated, but anyway, that's what he says. As I said, he didn't say it in a speech or something, he's put it in a High Court judgment, In 2017, a former judge of the Rajasthan High Court said that the peacock is a lifelong brahmachari. It never has sex with the peahen. The peahen gets pregnant after swallowing the tears of the peacock. Mind you, these guys are High Court judges, okay? In 2018, a former IPS officer and Union Minister of State for Education, who is also a PhD in chemistry, claimed that Charles Darwin's theory of evolution was scientifically wrong because no one has ever seen an ape turning into a man. then I would like you to see one video, short video.
I'll be having a permanent cosmic airport, like a hospital where the delivery of the babies will be done. So that time you can come and go through the delivery process. That is enough. You can get pregnant anywhere, wherever you are, in your country. But just for the delivery, if you come to Kailasa, we can make sure that baby is planted with the enlightened supernal effulgence DNA and enlightened genetic code.
Now, it's very obvious that the fellow doesn't know ABCD of genetics, Now, you may ask this question. Okay, we all know about magical thinking. We have seen harmless types of magical thinking and dangerous types of magical thinking. And we have seen that even educated people sometimes believe in this. Now, the question is, why do people believe in magic? Why do people indulge in magical thinking? The first reason is cultural conditioning from childhood. It is difficult to break the mental shackles imposed on us from a very young age. Only a few succeed in this. உங்களுக்கு அந்த யானை கதை தெரியும். யானை சின்னதாக இருக்கிறப்போ அதை காலை ஒரு கயிறு வச்சு ஒரு இது பண்ணுவானுங்க. அது பெருசானப்போ கூட it doesn't break free because it has been mentally conditioned to believe that it can't break free. அதே மாதிரி சூப்பர்ஸ்டிஷன்ஸ் அண்ட் pseudo-sciences அப்படி தான். சின்ன வயசுலேயே நமக்கு பிரெயின் வாஷ் பண்ணி விட்டாங்கன்னா அதுலேருந்து வெளியில் வர்றது ரொம்ப கஷ்டம். The second reason is the fear factor. Even if they suspect that the superstition is not true, many people still want to play it safe. நமக்கு எதுக்கு ரிஸ்க்கு? டியூஸ்டே ஏதோ பண்ணி நம்ம காரியம் சரியாகாமல் போச்சுன்னா வேண்டாம், நம்ம நாளைக்கு வெட்னஸ்டே பார்த்துக்கலாம். ஸோ தே வேஸ்ட் 1/7 of their life not doing anything, on Tuesdays. The third reason is that instead of promoting scientific temper, our education system seems to merely transform an illiterate gullible person into a literate gullible person and an uneducated superstitious person into an educated superstitious person. Paradoxically, modern technologies such as television and the internet have facilitated the spread of superstitious beliefs by providing platforms for their rapid and wide dissemination. முந்தி ஏதோ இருந்தாலும் அந்த லோக்கலாக இருந்தது. இப்போ டிவியில் இதில் வரனால the thing is spreading, even இன்டர்நெட்டில் வரனால things are actually spreading faster. The fourth reason is a little technical, but you must know this, because it's very important that you know this, is that our predisposition to magical thinking is reinforced by 3 psychological pitfalls which create illusions of magic or the supernatural. Let me illustrate these pitfalls with reference to astrology, which is perhaps the most popular among all superstitions. It is also a good barometer of the pervasiveness of irrationality and obscurantism in a society. The first is what is called confirmation bias. This is the common human tendency to seek and interpret information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. That is, if you are a believer in astrology, you will read only magazines or news things which support it. Anything opposed, you won't even touch them. Or if you are a non-believer in astrology, you will only read the things which are debunking astrology. Support பண்ணுறதுனா குப்பை அப்படின்னு சொல்லி நீங்கள் படிக்கவே மாட்டீங்க. For example, if you are a believer in astrology, you will remember only the few hits, correct predictions, and forget or ignore the innumerable misses, wrong predictions or irrelevant predictions made by your astrologer. The English philosopher Sir Francis Bacon commented on this selective nature of human memory more than 4 centuries ago. He wrote, "Such is the way of all superstitions, whether in astrology, dreams, omens, divine judgments or the like, wherein men having a delight in such vanities mark the events where they are fulfilled, but where they fail, though this happen much oftener, neglect and pass them by." For example, let us say I am thinking of Dr. Naganathan. Exactly at that time his call comes. So I am apt to think that perhaps there is a telepathic connection between him and me. I remember only the few hits. I have forgotten the innumerable misses. For example, his calls came several times when I was not thinking about him. And several times when I was thinking about him, calls didn't come. அதெல்லாம் நம்ம மறந்துடுறோம். ஈவன் அந்த Aztec, that women sacrifice that the Aztecs of Mexico were doing, I think, or in the frog marriage பண்ணுறவங்களாம் ஏதோ 1-2 வாட்டி இவங்க அது பண்ணியிருக்கப்போ, ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் இது சோலார் எக்லிப்ஸ், டோட்டல் சோலார் எக்லிப்ஸ் இருந்திருக்கலாம், இவன் ஒரு ஹியூமன் சாக்ரிஃபைஸ் பண்ணியிருப்பான், ஒரு 1/2 மணி நேரத்துக்கு அப்புறம் சோலார் எக்லிப்ஸ் போயிடும். ஸோ இ மஸ்ட் தாட் பாரு நம்ம ஹியூமன் சாக்ரிஃபைஸ்னால தான் போச்சுன்னு நினைக்கிறான். ஆர் ஃப்ராக் வெட்டிங் பண்ணியிருப்பான், நெக்ஸ்ட் டே மழை வருது, பாரு நம்ம ஃப்ராக் வெட்டிங் பண்ணனால தான் மழை வந்துருச்சுன்னு நினைக்கிறான். He forgets all the innumerable number of times that even didn't happen. This is a human tendency. We remember only the hits, we forget all the misses. The second pitfall to thinking is what is called anecdotal thinking. You often hear someone telling you an anecdote about an astrologer who made a startlingly accurate prediction. People say, இது சான்ஸே இல்லைங்க, அவர் அது பிரமாதமாக சொல்லிட்டாருங்க, அது எப்படி, அது அவருக்கு ஏதோ ஒரு பவர் இருக்குது அப்படின்னு. I'll tell you my own story. When I was a school student, my parents went out of town, to my native place to attend the wedding of my cousin sister. நான் தெரியாமல் முட்டாள்தனமாக ஏதோ சொன்னேன் எங்கள் அம்மா கிட்ட, ஒரு வேளை கல்யாணம் போஸ்ட்போன் ஆயிருச்சுன்னா அங்கே ஊரில் அங்கேயே இருந்துடாதீங்க, சீக்கிரம் திரும்பி வந்துடுங்க அப்படின்னு. மை மதர் சைடு என்ன இந்த மாதிரி பேசுகிற அப்படி எனக்கு நம்ப மாட்டீங்க, கல்யாணம் ஆக்சுவலாக போஸ்ட்போன் ஆயிடுச்சு. ஸோ அந்த மாப்பிள்ளை, அந்த பிரைட் ரூம் வரப்போ அந்த டிரைவர் தூங்கிட்டான், காரு போய் மரத்தில் இடித்து என்ன fellow, he was in hospital for 3 months, the wedding got postponed by 6 months. Now does it mean that I had predictive power? Not at all. It was just a random fluke. அப்பப்போ இந்த ரேண்டம் ஃப்ளூக் பற்றி நம்ம, பிகாஸ் we don't understand probability and statistics, the human mind is not conditioned to think statistically. We are conditioned to think only anecdotally. For example, this Dr. Naganathan example, நான் அவரை பற்றி நினைக்கிறப்ப அவர் கால் வருது. Now there are about 8 billion human beings, people in this world. 8 billion ana 8,000 million. Let us say the probability of this occurring is 1 in a million. அப்படியானாலும் எவ்ரி டே 8,000 பேருக்கு இந்த இது வரும். என்ன, the probability of this occurring in a day is 1 in a million ன்னு சொன்னாலும், every day 8,000 people will have this experience that when they thought of somebody, they got the phone call from them. அவன் சொல்லி பேசிகிட்டே போவான், டெய்லி ஒரு 8,000 பேர் கூட்டிகிட்டே போகுது. ஸோ the பரவலாக ஒரு ஃபீலிங் வந்துடும். ஸோ this is all because we don't understand statistics. Science doesn't accept such anecdotal evidence because it amounts to cherry-picking data. Science demands statistical evidence, where you take into account the favorable anecdotes as well as the unfavorable anecdotes. Since a certain number of hits, correct astrological predictions, can always occur due to sheer chance, I told you my own example, the only way to resolve the issue is by conducting a large number of statistical tests with an experimental group of astrologers and a control group of ordinary people who are asked to simply guess and see if the astrologers can predict at significantly higher than chance probabilities. That is, 2 group. ஒன்றில் ஒரு 20 astrologers, இன்னொன்றில் 20 காலேஜ் ஸ்டூடெண்ட்ஸ். 2 பேருக்குமே ஹொரோஸ்கோப் கொடுக்கப்படும், ப்ரெடிக்ட் பண்ணான்னு சொல்லப்படும். காலேஜ் ஸ்டூடெண்ட்ஸ்க்கு அவனுக்கு ஒன்றும் தெரியாது, அவன் சும்மா நீ என்ன வேணால் எழுது, தோணுது எழுது அப்படிங்கிறாங்க. 2 பேரோட ரிசல்ட் கம்பேர் பண்ணால் எப்படி இருக்குன்னு நினைக்கிறீங்க? 2 ஈக்குவல் தான். In one famous experiment, several horoscopes were given to an experimental group of astrologers and a control group of college students. Both groups were asked to tell just 2 things based on the horoscopes: male or female, living or dead. வேறு எதுவும் பெருசாக சொல்ல வேண்டாம், இது மட்டும் சொல்லு, male or female, living or dead. The group of astrologers fared no better than the group of students because both were guessing. ஜெயந்த் நார்லிக்காரன் சொல்லி ஒரு ஃபேமஸ் ஃபிசிசிஸ்ட் வாஸ் தேர் இன் இந்தியா, இறந்து போய்ட்டாருன்னு நினைக்கிறேன். அவர் இதே மாதிரி ஒரு இது பண்ணார். அங்கே என்ன சொன்னார், மேல் ஆர் ஃபீமேல் அண்ட் சில்ட்ரனில் சம் வர் மென்டலி ஹேண்டிகேப்ட், சம் வர் நார்மல் சில்ட்ரன். நார்மல் சைல்டா மென்டலி சேலஞ்ச் சைல்டான்னு சொல்லி அதில் கூட தெர் இஸ் நோ டிஃப்ரென்ஸ் பிட்வீன் த பர்ஃபார்மன்ஸ் ஆஃப் த கண்ட்ரோல் குரூப் ஆஃப் ஸ்டூடெண்ட்ஸ் and the performance of the astrologers. All statistical tests conducted on astrology have showed that astrologers really can't predict anything more at better than chance rates. It's our inability to think in statistical terms that makes us think that some people possess miraculous powers of foretelling the future, which is not true. The last point is Forer effect. I don't know how many of you have read this Linda Goodman's Sun Science and all that. நீங்கள் இந்த சைன் எதுன்னு சொல்லாமல் let's say Dr. Naganathan is Aquarius, I'm just saying. But I read out the thing for Sagittarius. He will say, "Amma correct irukanga, idu ella enakku poruthudu appdimbar." Because that is again human psychology. In 1948, the American psychologist Bertram Forer conducted an experiment in which he gave each of the students customized personality profiles which they rated as highly accurate. He gave all his students, இதான் உங்கள் பர்சனாலிட்டி ப்ரொஃபைல் சரியாக இருக்கா பாருங்கள், எல்லோரும் பிரமாதமாக இருக்குது சார் அப்படின்னாங்க. What he had done was, he had given everybody the same thing. The students were astonished when they were told later that all the profiles were identical. Another amusing experiment was done in France in 1968. A French researcher called Michel Gauquelin sent the horoscope of a notorious serial killer to 500 individuals. They were told, "Idu unga horoscope allu solli koduthu," but actually it was the horoscope of a serial killer. எப்படி இது கரெக்டாக இருக்கா உங்களுக்கு பொறுத்துதான்னு கேட்டால் 95% அவங்க இது பிரமாதமாக இருக்குது, யாருங்க இது போட்டது அப்படின்னு சொல்லியிருக்காங்க. ஸோ a staggering 95% of respondents claimed that the description matched their personalities. Both are examples of what is called the Forer effect, which describes the well-known human tendency to perceive general pronouncements and vague predictions as uniquely accurate and tailor-made for ourselves. That is, அவன் ஒரு ஜென்ரலாக வேக சொல்லியிருப்பான், பட் நம்ம அதை நம்ம சிச்சுவேஷனுக்கு அப்ளை பண்ணி அவன் கரெக்டாக சொல்லிட்டான்னு நினைப்போம். ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள், an astrologer may make a fuzzy statement like, "Something bad is going to happen to you." வேக தான் சொல்லுவான். அதுக்கப்புறம், "If you happen to lose money or fall sick or get overlooked for promotion sometime later, you will interpret the statement suitably to your particular case and give credit to the astrologer for having predicted the event." Other fuzzy statements which astrologers commonly make and that resonate with a wide cross-section of people are, "Something good is going to happen to you, sooner or later something good is always going to happen, sooner or later something bad is always going to happen. You have not got the credit you deserve." ஒவ்வொருத்த மனசுலையும் நான் பிஸ்தா, நான் எனக்கு வேண்டிய கிரெடிட் நமக்கு வரல அப்படின்னு எல்லாருக்கும் அந்த ஃபீலிங் இருக்குது. Then some persons in your inner circle are inimical to you. எல்லாருக்கும் அப்படி தான், பக்கத்தில் இருக்கிற ஃப்ரெண்டு எனிமையில் இதில் தான் இவனொத்த எனிமீஸ் இருப்பான். ஸோ இவனுக்கு யூஸ்வலாக இந்த மாதிரி ஜென்ரல் ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட்ஸ் தான் சொல்லிட்டு போவானுங்க. நீங்கள் என்ன நினைக்கிறீங்க, ஆமாம் இவர் ஸோ அண்ட் ஸோ நம்ம க்ளோஸ் ஃப்ரெண்ட், அந்த ஆள் எனக்கு மொட்டை பெடிஷன் போட்டால் எம்எல்ஏ பாருங்கள் இவர் கரெக்டாக சொல்லிட்டாரு அப்படின்னு இருப்பான். பட் ஆக்சுவலி அவர் ஜென்ரலாக சொல்லியிருக்காரு. இன்ஃபேக்ட் when I was a college student, I used to be, let me make a confession, I used to be a fake astrologer. இந்த டூரில் போகிறப்பெல்லாம் சும்மா அடிச்சு விடுவேன். இந்த Forer effect அப்போ எனக்கு தெரியாது, பட் ஐ ஆக்சுவலி எம்ப்ளாய்ட் இட் வித்தவுட் நோயிங். அந்த காலத்தில் இந்த வேக்சினேஷனில் அவ்வளோ இல்லை. ஸோ மெனி ஆஃப் த பீப்புள் கேம் க்ளோஸ் டு டெத் அண்ட் தென் தே வுட் சர்வைவ். ஸோ என்னோடய ஃப்ரெண்டு ஒருத்தங்கிட்ட சொன்னேன், இந்த ட்ரெயினில் போகிறப்போ, "நீ சின்ன வயசில் ஒரு வாட்டி சாகிறதுக்கு ரொம்ப க்ளோஸாக வந்த, அப்புறம் பொழைச்சிட்டா, இனிமேல் கவலையில் நீ ரொம்ப நாள் இருப்பேன்." அவன் சொன்னேன், "எப்படிங்க இதை கண்டுபிடிச்சிங்க?" அப்படின்னா, என்ன ஆச்சுன்னு நான் கேட்டேன், எனக்கு தெரியாது. அவன் சொன்னான், "சின்ன வயசில் ஒரு பக்கெட்டை ஃபுல் ஆஃப் வாட்டர் இருந்தது, நான் குழந்தையாக இருக்கப்போ நடந்து தலை உள்ளப்போ, I went into the bucket head first. Luckily my mother pulled me out just in time." அப்புறம் நான் கேட்டுக்கிட்டு அவன் இது தெரிஞ்ச மாதிரி நடித்தேன். அவன் என்னை பற்றி எல்லாருக்கிட்டையும் சொல்லிட்டான், அவர் பிரமாதமாக சொல்கிறாருங்க அப்படின்ட்டான். So smart astrologers avoid making specific predictions but make vague general statements and let the Forer effect do its work. One more video கொஞ்சம்.
2020ஆம் ஆண்டு ஒரு மிகச்சிறந்த ஆண்டாக இந்திய திருநாட்டிலே வாழக்கூடிய குடிமக்கள் அத்துணை பேருக்குமே இருக்க போகுதுப்பா.
2020ல கோவிட் வந்தது.
ராகுவினுடைய அம்சமான இந்த ஆண்டு எது எடுத்தாலும் பிரமாண்டம் பிரமாண்டம் பிரமாண்டம்.
அது எப்படா நெஞ்சில கொஞ்சம் கூட ஈரம் இல்லாம இவ்வளவு பெரிய பொய் சொல்ற?
இந்த இயற்கை சீற்றம், பேரழிவு, இதுக்கெல்லாம் இனிமேல் எந்த விதத்திலும் கெடுதல்கள்லாம் நடக்காது.
நீங்களா எங்கேந்திரா வரீங்க? வெள்ளையும் சொல்லிமா தொப்பையை தள்ளிக்கிட்டு.
இந்த 2020 புத்தாண்டு மிகவும் அற்புதமான பலன்களை கொடுக்க போகுது.
இவனுக்கு ஒரு சீட் எடுத்து பாருங்க ஐயா, வெறும் பொய்யா சொல்லிக்கிட்டு தெரியலாம்.
அவர் வாழ்க்கையில தீராத பிரச்சனைகள் தீர்றதுக்கும், மன நிறைவுகள் கொடுக்கறதுக்கும், சந்தோஷம் இருக்கிறதுக்கும், குதூகலம் இருக்கிறதுக்கும், குடும்பத்துல ஐஸ்வர்யம் தாண்டவம் ஆடுறதுக்கும், பொருளாதாரத்துல வரவு செலவுகள் ஏராளமா
பெருசா போய்கிட்டு இருக்கு.
ஆகையால் குரு பகவான் இதுவரை 7ஆம் இடத்தில் இருந்தார், இப்பொழுது தன் சொந்த வீட்டுக்கு 8ஆம் இடத்துக்கு வருகிறார்.
புரிஞ்சதா?
ராசிக்கு 6ஆம் இடத்துல உபஜயஸ்தானத்துல ஆட்சி பெறுவதனால நோய் நொடியெல்லாம் தீரும்.
So And mind you, these people are supposed to be the best astrologers of Tamil Nadu. அவனெல்லாம் ஒரு டிவி ப்ரோக்ராமில் போட்டு பேசியிருக்காங்க. The short point here is, as I told you again, see, the human brain evolved on the African savanna. ஏதோ மானை பிடிக்கிறது இதை பிடிக்கிறதுக்கு தான் நம்ம பிரெயின் இவால்வ் ஆச்சே தவிர, it was not meant to, but subsequently we have put it to use. We have developed mathematics, music, physics, science எல்லாம் பண்ணியிருக்கோம். ஸோ அந்த ஸ்டாட்டிஸ்டிக்கல் திங்கிங் நமக்கு சரியாக வர மாட்டேங்குது. anecdotal thinking தான் வருது. ஒரு ஹிட்டை போய் நம்ம பெருசுப்படுத்துவோம், கரெக்டாக சொன்னாருங்க அப்படின்னு சொல்லி நம்ம பெருசுப்படுத்துவோம். And you must, as I told you, freak occurrences always happen. If you want, I'll tell you one more freak occurrence. I was in my final year engineering. I went on a Bharat Darshan, அப்போ ஒரு ஆல் இண்டியா ட்ரிப் இருந்தது, ட்ரெயினில் போனோம். மும்பையிலேருந்து என்னோட வெரி க்ளோஸ் ஃப்ரெண்ட், 1 year senior அவன், he was working in Pune in telco. But telco was far away from the station. He said, உன்னால் வர முடியாது, நான் ஸ்டேஷனில் வந்து ரிசீவ் பண்ணுவேன், நீ எப்போ வரையோ தந்தி அடி அப்படியெல்லாம், அப்போல்லாம் தந்தி தான். So I sent him a telegram saying I'm coming by Miraj Express, train will reach at 12 at Pune. 12க்கு போனேன், ஸ்டேஷனில் இவன் காணோம். ஒரு half an hour I walked up and down thinking, வரப்போகிறான்னு சொல்லி காணோம். Then I thought, okay, நம்மளே ஏதோ ஆட்டோவோ ஏதோ பஸ்ஸை பிடிச்சி போகலாம் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி I went out of the railway station. Pata, he is walking on the street. I ran up to him. I thought he must have missed me in the station. He said, "Nee eppadi inga vanda?" He had not even received my telegram. It was a freak occurrence, one in a. So what I'm trying to say is, life la freak occurrences, 1 in a million chance occurrences do happen. அதை நம்ம பெருசுப்படுத்தக்கூடாது. இந்த 2 இன்சிடென்ட் தான் என்னோட இதில் நடந்திருக்கு. இது ஒன்று அந்த வெட்டிங் போஸ்ட்போன்மெண்ட் ப்ரிடிக்ட் பண்ணுது, இன்னொன்று இவனை பார்த்தது. பட் எல்லாரும் லைஃப்லையும் இந்த மாதிரி ஏதோ ஒரு நடக்கும். பட் சம் பீப்புள் நோ தட் இட் இஸ் ஒன்லி சான்ஸ், சம் பீப்புள் டேக் இட் டூ சீரியஸ்லி. ஓகே, நவ் த இம்பார்ட்டன்ஸ் ஆஃப் சயின்டிஃபிக் டெம்பர். Scientific temper is not merely a philosophical idea, but a practical necessity to transform India into a progressive nation. That's why Article 51A(h) of the Constitution of India makes it a fundamental duty to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and spirit of inquiry and reform. Indira Gandhi time la, she brought in a constitutional amendment. Now developing scientific temper is a fundamental duty. Constitution la vandalam, but nobody has, it has had no impact. In a country of 140 crore population, why is it that we have so few Nobel laureates, so few patent holders, inventors? Very few. I mean, proportionately நீங்கள் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா ரொம்ப கம்மி. The reason is, we as a people lack scientific temper. Just as we cannot develop a beautiful garden without first removing all the weeds, so also it is not possible to have a scientific culture as long as the minds of the people are cluttered with the weeds of superstition and pseudo-sciences. Second, if India wishes to be a global leader in science and technology, நம்ம 3 வேலை பண்ணணும். ஒன்று, we must improve our human capital by investing more, much more on education and health. ரெண்டாவது, we must spend more on research and development. We are spending very less on research and development, only about 0.8% of our GDP. China 5% பண்ணுறான், USA 4.5% பண்ணுறான், and their GDP is much of their GDP is much bigger than ours. And 3, the most important, we must foster scientific temper. இல்லாட்டி சும்மா PhD பண்ணிட்டோம், இந்த மாதிரி டார்வின் இது போய் நம்ம கண்ணுக்கு ஏற்றாப்புல எங்கேயாலும் குரங்கு மனிதனாக இருக்கான்னு ஒரு PhD ஒரு கமிஷனர் ஆஃப் போலீஸ் பேசுகிறான். ஸோ யூ கேன் இமேஜின் that mere education doesn't mean anything. So you have to consciously foster scientific temper. Why do you need scientific temper? There's another reason. Some communities think that they're innately superior and others are innately inferior. இந்தியாவில் இது ரொம்ப இருக்குது. ஜாதி அடிப்படையில், ரிலீஜன் அடிப்படையில், மொழி அடிப்படையில், India's diverse religions, castes, languages and cultures are associated with deep-rooted prejudices and discrimination. The whites think that they are superior to the blacks. The upper caste think that they are superior to the lower caste. Men think that they are superior to women. எதுலுமே உண்மை இல்லை. இது உண்மை இல்லைன்னு யார் சொல்லணும்? சயின்ஸ் தான் சொல்லணும். Science has shown that everybody is descended from a common ancestor only about 3 lakh years ago in Africa. So we are all from the children of the same mother, By emphasizing evidence over tradition or dogma And by proving that the prejudices and discriminatory practices have no rational basis, scientific temper can serve as a unifying force, promote social reform, and lead to a more inclusive and equitable society. நம்ம ஊரில் இந்த மாதிரி ரிசர்ச்சை பண்ணுறதில்ல. ஐ மீன் சோஷியலிஸ்ட் இதிலெல்லாம் பண்ணுறதே இல்லை. வேறஸ் யூஎஸ்ஏ யூரோப்லாம் நிறைய பண்ணிட்டே இருப்பானுங்க இந்த மாதிரி. In this age of social media, உங்களுக்கு தெரியும், propaganda, misinformation and false news have the potential to undermine public health initiatives, to polarize public opinion, to instigate public unrest and to reduce trust in the democratic process. ஒரு வாட்ஸ்அப்லையோ இமெயிலையோ ஒரு மெசேஜ் வந்தால் எது உண்மை எது பொய்ன்னு இப்போ தெரியாது. We don't know if it is genuine or a fake message generated by artificial intelligence. We don't know. So scientific tempered இருந்தால் you will be able to evaluate better. ஓ இது பொய்யா தோணுது, இல்லாட்டி சில பேர் எது வந்தாலும் நம்புறவங்க இருக்கான். And sometimes this can create law and order problems also, and it can create health problems also. If somebody simply says vaccines are bad, அதை முட்டாள்தனமாக நம்பிடுறான். Vaccines பேடா இல்லையா, வேக்சினால் ஆட்டிசம் ஆகுமா இல்லையாங்கிறது it can only proved scientifically, and all scientific tests have shown that it's false. But many people still believe in it. Even Trump used to be a vaccine denier. I don't know in the termல எப்படி இருப்பாருன்னு தெரியல. போன termல he used to be a vaccine denier. Third, next point, environmental degradation, pollution and climate change pose significant threats to India's future. Scientific temper leads to the adoption of evidence-based governance that prioritizes data, research and expert advice. It promotes substantive, sustainable practices, renewable energy and climate-friendly policies, and helps balance economic growth with ecological preservation. Climate change பற்றி சுத்தமாக கவலைப்படாமல் இருக்கோம் நம்ம. I think you all know the story of that frog in that kettle. அந்த ஹாட் வாட்டரில் இந்த ஃப்ராக் போட்டிங்கன்னா டக்குன்னு குச்சிடும். பட் கெட்டில் கோல்டு வாட்டர் போட்டு கிராஜுவலாக ஹீட் பண்ணிங்கன்னா ஃப்ராகுக்கு தெரியாது, இட் வில் கெட் பாயில்டு. அந்த மாதிரி climate change is a slow and gradual process, and we are like the frogs in the kettle. Especially India, we are not taken enough steps, according to me, to combat climate change. Scientific temper is crucial not only for the nation, but also for individuals, citizens. தனிப்பட்ட மனிதர்களுக்கு இது முக்கியம். To protect themselves from fraudsters in their day-to-day life. If you don't develop the spirit of critical thinking, your life will be a case of gullible travels, and you will be easily cheated by every unscrupulous businessman, conman, and godman passing by. There are people who peddle fake therapies for almost everything, from how to make you fair, to how to make you tall, to how to make you slim, to how to get a flat belly, all for a hefty fee, of course. These therapies just don't work. Steer clear of them. There are people who will promise you various types of money multiplication schemes. They will say, we'll double your money in 3 months. நிறைய பேர் ரிட்டையர் ஆனவங்க அந்த பணத்தை எல்லாம் அதில் போட்டு தொலைச்சிக்கிட்டு நிறைய பேர் இருக்கானுங்க. And hustle you to join before it is too late. It is their money which will get multiplied, not yours. I have known any number of people who have gone bust by investing their money with such conmen. Again, steer clear of such people. There are people who pose as godmen, as if God had singled them out for special favors, set them up above the rest of us, and appointed them to be the people's spiritual leaders. The vast majority of them are charlatans. You don't need any middleman between you and God. My advice is to steer clear of all such godmen. So the short point here is, யாரோ ஒன்று சொன்னாலோ இல்லாட்டி நம்ம ஏதோ படித்தாலோ இல்லாட்டி டிவிலையோ வேறு எதில் யூடியூப்பில் ஏதோ பார்த்தாலோ கண்மூடித்தனமாக நம்பக்கூடாது. We have to use our critical faculties and say, இது உண்மையாக இருக்குமா பொய்யா இருக்குமா. The only positive fallout of this fake messages now is, இப்போ எல்லாருக்குமே சந்தேகம் வந்துருச்சு இது உண்மையாக பொய்யான்னு. That has actually made people more skeptical. That's the only positive thing I can think of the flurry of fake messages. Okay, next we come to the topic. Why is Buddhism considered the most rational of all religions? I don't have to tell you, you all know the history of science and religion. They have been in conflict for about 1,000 years. Between the 5th century and 15th century, there was very little science in Europe because the church suppressed everything with an iron hand. Islam vandapo, for the first 300-400 years, there was an outburst of scientific activity. But 12th century kapra suttama illa. For the last 8 centuries, almost nothing major has come out from the Islamic world. Hinduism எடுத்திங்கன்னா during the golden age of Buddhism, from about 5th century BC to about 7th, 8th century AD, there was, all communities, but from 8th century AD to 19th century AD, there's a dark age. Nothing worthwhile has been done in India, though adukku munnala nariya pramadama work nama pannalum, nothing worthwhile has been done. Because religion tends to put obstacles, in scientific development. It is sometimes said that but for the long and bitter struggle between science and religion, with religion acting as a major stumbling block, the world could have had electricity, automobiles, airplanes, computers, and the internet 1,000 years earlier. In the ஆயிரக்கணக்கான வருஷம் வேஸ்ட் ஆகாம இருந்தால் you would have had internet in 1000 AD, not now. Rapid scientific progress over the last 500 years has exposed the falsity of many of religion's revealed truths, thereby sowing the seeds of distrust about its divine origins and subverting its hegemony in society. But the conflict between religion and science is far from over. Christian fundamentalists oppose family planning, abortions, stem cell research, and the teaching of evolution in schools. Many Islamic countries have actually banned the teaching of evolution in schools. In 2001, UGC took a retrograde decision to fund courses in Vedic astrology in Indian universities. In 2023, NCERT removed evolution. Evolution is the basis for biology. And periodic table is the basis for chemistry. இது ரெண்டு நீ எடுத்து நான் அப்புறம் என்ன biology சொல்லி கொடுக்க போகிறேன், என்ன chemistry சொல்ல போகிறேன்னு தெரில எனக்கு. Periodic table from the textbooks for classes 9 and 10, ostensibly to reduce student workload. About 6,000 teachers, scientists, intellectuals wrote a letter to NCERT saying, please restore these two topics, they are critical. இது வரைக்கும் பண்ணல. The only major organized religion that is not antithetical to science is Buddhism. I take it that all of you know the life of the Buddha, the basics of Buddhism, including his 4 noble truths and 8-fold path, and the history of Buddhism in India and elsewhere. I will not go into these aspects. I will dwell upon why Buddhism, as originally taught by Buddha, is considered the most scientific of all organized religions. Subsequently, a lot of superstitions have got added on to Buddhism, but Buddha original it is a very, very scientific and rational religion. First point, authority. In most religions, authority is often centralized in priests, clerics, or religious institutions that mediate between the divine and the followers. The Buddha rejected the idea of an authoritative priesthood. He emphasized self-reliance and personal responsibility in achieving enlightenment. He said, priests, you can reach God by yourself. Once the Buddha was wandering in the Kosala country and entered a town called Kesaputra, whose inhabitants were called the Kalamas. They told the Buddha, many monks and Brahmins visit Kesaputra. They expound and explain only their own doctrines. The doctrines of others they despise, revile, and pull to pieces. Venerable Sir, there is a doubt, there is uncertainty in our minds concerning them. Which of these monks and Brahmins spoke the truth and which falsehood? இந்த கேசப்புத்தாவு ஆளுங்க என்ன சொல்கிறாங்க, நிறைய பேர் எங்கள் ஊருக்கு வராங்க, ஒவ்வொருத்தன் ஒன்று ஒன்று சொல்லிட்டு போகிறான். அவன் என்னோட தான் கரெக்டு, அவன் சொல்கிறது குப்பைன்னு சொல்கிறான். யார் உண்மை சொல்கிறாங்க, யார் பொய் சொல்கிறாங்கன்னு எங்களால் டிஸ்டிங்கிஷ் பண்ண முடியல. அதுக்கு புத்தா ஒரு ஃபேமஸ் ரிப்ளை கொடுக்குறாரு. தட் இஸ் கால்ட் கலம சுத்தா. And in Pali it's called Sutta, in Sanskrit it is Sutra. It's an excellent thing, Buddha says, Kalamas, do not believe something merely because you heard it repeatedly. It is passed down by tradition. It is part of sacred test. Can you believe this? In other religions they'll say part of sacred test, panne, illati you'll go to hell. But Buddha says don't believe it merely because it is in part of the sacred text. It is widely believed or popular. It is taught by teachers or elders. It is spoken by someone you admire or respect. I have said it. நானே சொல்லியிருந்தாலும் கூட you should not நம்பக்கூடாது, கண்மூடித்தனமாக நம்பக்கூடாது. It seems to align with your preconceived notions. It appears to align with common sense. It is based on logical reasoning or deduction alone. I don't think even a scientist could have said better than this. The last two, you may be wondering, why is Buddha saying common sense? It appears to align with common sense. Common sense would align on every tapa irukka mudiyum. Or if it is based on logical reasoning or deduction alone, the emphasis there is on alone. He says, but after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it. So Buddha is saying, I want you to go through it once again. Let me read it once again because it's so good. It's called Kalama Sutra and it's a very, very famous passage in Buddhism. Kalamas, do not believe something merely because you heard it repeatedly. It is passed down by tradition. It is part of the sacred texts. It is widely believed or popular. It is taught by teachers or elders. It is spoken by someone you admire or respect. Even if I have said it, it seems to align with your preconceived notions. It appears to align with common sense. It's based on logical reasoning or deduction alone. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it. Now you may wonder, how can something be wrong if it aligns with common sense? It can be, because many truths in life are counterintuitive, whether it is scientific truths, economic truths, whatever. You know that many truths are counterintuitive. For example, the flat earth theory and the geocentric theory of the universe were based on common sense, but were wrong. When people said earth is flat, it was based on common sense. Pata flat adana theriyide. And when people believed in geocentric theory of the universe, again it was common sense. But because the sun and other things seem to go around the earth. But common sense can be misleading at times. And Buddha andha kalathile and the point sollirukkaru. Similarly, you may say, how can something based on logical reasoning alone be wrong? Yes, it can also be wrong because pure logical reasoning detached from empirical observation has often led to incorrect conclusions. For example, Aristotle reasoned that heavier objects must fall faster than lighter ones. This seemed perfectly logical, but was wrong. It took Galileo's actual experiments, dropping objects from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, to disprove this. So sometimes logically ella correct irukkalam, but it's not rooted in observation, not rooted. நம்ம கவர்மெண்ட்ல சில வாட்டி இப்படி பண்றது உண்டு. ஏதோ பாலிசி போடுவான், அது அங்கே ஃபீல்ட் லெவல் ரியாலிட்டி தெரியாமல் பாலிசி போடுவான். ஸோ வாட் புத்தா இஸ் சேயிங் இஸ் மியர் லாஜிக் இஸ் நாட் சஃபிஷியன்ட். யுவர் லாஜிக் ஹேஸ் டு பி பேஸ்ட் ஆன் reality. It should be well grounded. That's what he is. Thus, the Buddha was a man far ahead of his time who was cognizant of logical fallacies and other pitfalls to thinking that most people, even today, and even governments, are prey to. Governmentல நிறைய சில பாலிசியில் தப்பாக வருதுன்னா காரணம் இதுதான். Logically it may be correct, but practically on the groundல அது சரியில்லை. The Buddha is the only prophet to warn his followers against blind faith in a received dogma, including his own. Have you ever seen any prophet of any religion saying, என்னை கூட நீ நம்பாத அப்படின்னு யாரும் சொல்ல மாட்டாங்க. But Buddha said it. In fact, there is one more sutra called Gandavyuha Sutra, where Buddha says, O bhikshus and wise men, just as a goldsmith would test his gold by burning, cutting and rubbing it, so you must examine my words and accept them, but not merely out of reverence from me. நான் சொல்கிறேன்னு ஒரு மரியாதைக்கோஸ்கரம் இதில் நீங்கள் நம்பக்கூடாது. எப்படி கோல்ட்ஸ்மித் நீங்கள் ஒரு தங்க இது உண்மையான கோல்டான டெஸ்ட் பண்ணி தான் பண்ணுறானோ அதே மாதிரி நீங்கள் கூட அதே பாலிசி நான் சொன்னது கூட நீங்கள் அந்த லாஜிக் அப்ளை பண்ணணும். So faith in Buddhism is not blind, but arises from understanding and insight. The Buddha placed the responsibility of understanding truth after thorough examination and intellectual engagement on the individual. பொறுப்பு உன்னோடு தான் அப்படின்ட்டார். By promoting self-reliance and spiritual inquiry, he fostered a culture of personal growth and intellectual freedom. The analogy of a goldsmith testing the authenticity of gold parallels the scientific method, where hypotheses and theories are subjected to rigorous tests before being accepted. It underlines the Buddha's alignment with rational and empirical thinking. இப்போ scientific method நம்ம அப்படி தான் பண்ணுறோம். ஒரு புது ட்ரக் வருதுன்னா we test it, or some new claim is made, we test it. Buddha is saying the same thing. Now, you know the Dalai Lama of Tibet, இப்போ நம்ம இங்கே தான் இருக்காரு. In his book, The Universe in a Single Atom, 2006, the present Dalai Lama has stated, if scientific analysis were conclusive to demonstrate certain claims in Buddhism to be false, then we must accept the findings of science and abandon these claims. Can you imagine the leader of any other religion saying this? Nobody will even say this. But even more remarkable is the fact that there was no uproar in the Buddhist community, nobody got offended, and the statement was simply taken for granted. Yaru Dalai Lama poi adikka pola idu panna pola. So, whereas this is such a thing is not possible. You can't expect an Ayatollah or a Shankaracharya or a Pope to make a statement like this. They will never do it. Now, this is a statement on authority from Thomas Huxley. This is a recent scientist statement. Thomas Huxley, as you know, was known as the bulldog of Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was an intellectual, but அவருக்கு சரியா பேச வராது. நல்லா எழுதுவார். Huxley was a good speaker, so the மேடலெல்லாம் Huxley தான் இவரை டிஃபெண்ட் பண்ணி பேசிட்டு இருந்தார். So he was called Charles Darwin's bulldog. So Huxley makes a statement, is written in 19th century English, but still it almost parallels what Buddha said. Huxley says, the improver of natural knowledge absolutely refuses to acknowledge authority as such. For him, skepticism is the highest of duties, blind faith the one unpardonable sin. And it cannot be otherwise. For every great advance in natural knowledge has involved the absolute rejection of authority, the cherishing of the keenest skepticism, the annihilation of the spirit of blind faith, and the most ardent votary of science holds his firmest convictions, not because the men he most venerates hold them, not because their verity is testified by portents and wonders, but because his experience teaches him that whenever he chooses to bring these convictions into contact with their primary source, nature, whenever he thinks fit to test them by appealing to experiment and to observation, nature will confirm them. The man of science has learned to believe in justification not by faith but by verification. This is what modern scientist thinks about scientific method. This is exactly what Buddha has said in the Kalama Sutra. The next point is about God. Most religions involve metaphysical conjectures about the nature of God, the universe, or the afterlife, often emphasizing faith over evidence. யாருக்குமே தெரியாது, எல்லாமே நம்பிக்கையில் தான் சொல்கிறாங்க. The Buddha discouraged speculative metaphysics. He chose to remain silent rather than offering speculative opinions about matters unknowable, such as whether there is a God, whether there is an afterlife. There is a famous sutra called Kula Sutra. It contains one of Buddha's most well-known parables, the parable of the poisoned arrow. This teaching is delivered in response to a monk named Malunkya, who expressed dissatisfaction with Buddha for not addressing certain metaphysical questions. The Malunkya was a disciple of Buddha. He says, என்ன நீங்கள் ஏதோ சின்ன விஷயம் பேசுகிறீங்க, பெரிய விஷயம்லாம் பேச மாட்டேங்கிறீங்க. புத்தா கேட்குறாரு, என்ன பெரிய விஷயம் நான் பேசல. Is the universe eternal or not? Is the universe infinite or not? Is the soul identical with the body or different from it? Does a Tathagata, that is a liberated one, exist after death? எனக்கு இதுக்கு தான் பதில் தெரியணும், நீங்கள் இது சொல்லாட்டி நான் விட்டுட்டு போகிறேன் அப்படின்னு அவர் மிரட்டுறாரு புத்தாவை. யார்? இந்த Malunkya. Malunkya insisted that he would leave the Buddha's order unless these questions were answered. In response, Buddha delivered the parable of the poisoned arrow. The Buddha compared Malunkya's demands for answers to metaphysical questions to a man wounded by a poisoned arrow. Instead of seeking immediate medical treatment to save his life, the man insists on knowing irrelevant details such as who shot the arrow, what caste does the archer belong to, what type of bow and arrow was used, what material was used for the arrow shaft and feathers. புத்தா சொல்கிறாரு, ஒரு பாய்சன் ஆரோ உடம்புல பதிந்து இருக்குன்னா உன்னோட இம்மிடியேட் இது என்ன இருக்கணும், அதை எடுத்து ட்ரீட்மெண்ட். அதை விட்டுட்டு நீ தேவையில்லாத கேள்வி கேட்டியன்னா, அதே மாதிரி கடவுள் இருக்காரா இல்லையா, ஆஃப்டர் லைஃப் இருக்கா இல்லையான்னு நம்மளால் சொல்ல முடியாது. யாருக்கு இது தெரிஞ்சு நீ ஒன்றும் கிழிக்க போகிறதில்ல. நீ உன்னோட வேலையை கவனி, டே டு டே லிவிங்கை பார்த்துக்கோ. So the Buddha explained that by the time all these questions are answered, the man would likely die of his wound. Similarly, pursuing answers to speculative metaphysical questions is futile when the pressing issue, the problem of suffering and its cessation, remains unaddressed. நம்ம நல்லா வாழ்ந்தோமா சந்தோஷமாக வாழ்ந்தோமாங்கிறது தான் நமக்கு குறிக்கோளாக இருக்கணும். கடவுள் இருக்காரா, யூனிவர்ஸு எவ்வளோ பெருசு, நம்ம சத்ததுக்கப்புறம் இருப்போமா, அதெல்லாம் உனக்கு எதுக்கு, தேவையில்லாத விஷயம் அப்படிங்கிறத புத்தா சொன்னார். In modern science and philosophy, the parable mirrors the distinction between meaningful scientific inquiry and speculative metaphysics. It advocates for an evidence-based problem-solving approach. In personal life, it encourages focusing on actionable solutions to real problems rather than being distracted by irrelevant or unproductive questions. நம்மளே நம்ம பசங்ககிட்டயோ ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸ்கிட்ட சொல்லுவாங்க, ஏன் தேவையில்லாத டைம் வேஸ்ட் பண்ணுறங்க, எது முக்கியமோ அதை கவனி அப்படிங்கிற மாதிரி. தட்ஸ் த பாயிண்ட் புத்தா இஸ் சேயிங். In 1802, when Napoleon Bonaparte asked the French astronomer, physicist and mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace why his book on the solar system had no mention of God, its creator, Laplace is supposed to have replied, "Sir, I had no need for that hypothesis." So the French mathematician Laplace he had written a book on the solar system, which is an improvement on Newton's book. ஸோ அதில் கடவுளை பற்றி எங்கேயோ ஒரு மென்ஷன் பண்ணல. ஸோ நெப்போலியன் கேட்குற, என்ன உன் புக்கில் ஒரு இடத்துல கூட கடவுள் பேரே இல்லை. ஸோ லாப்லஸ் மேட் அ ஃபேமஸ் ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட். ஹி செட், "சார், ஐ ஹட் நோ நீட் ஃபார் தட் ஹைப்போதசிஸ்." ஸோ புத்தா வாஸ் சேயிங் த சேம் திங். அவர் இருக்கிறப்போ கடவுள் என்ன இருக்காரா இல்லையான்னு யாருக்கும் தெரியாது, இப்போவும் இருக்காரா இல்லையா யாருக்கும் அத்தன்டிக்காக தெரியாது. ஸோ இதெல்லாம் தேவையில்லாத விஷயம் நீ அப்படிங்கிற புத்தாவோட அட்வைஸ். As mentioned earlier, science accepts only physical reality and believes in finding natural explanations for things. It does not waste time exploring metaphysical questions about the existence of God, the supernatural, and miracles. The Buddha's point about prioritizing what truly matters over what is merely intellectually stimulating is reflected in modern scientific research grants, which are more easily available for questions with practical applications. ப்ராக்டிக்கல் அப்ளிகேஷன்ஸ் இருந்தால் தான் கிராண்ட் உங்களுக்கு கிடைக்கும். நீங்கள் ஏதோ அப்ஸ்ட்ரூஸ் ப்ரொபோசல் கொடுத்தீங்கன்னா அவ்வளோ ஈஸியாக கிடைக்காது. As Nobel laureate in medicine Peter Medawar said, "If politics is the art of the possible, research is surely the art of the soluble. Both are intensely practical affairs. Good scientists study the most important problems they think that they can solve." இப்போ நீங்கள் ஒரு சயின்டிஸ்ட்னு எடுத்தாலும், இப்போ நம்ம ஏழுமலை பயோடெக்னாலஜிஸ்ட்னு சொன்னால், அவர் எதோ அப்ஸ்ட்ரூஸ் ப்ராப்ளம் எடுக்க மாட்டார். எது ப்ராக்டிக்கல், எது முடியும், எது யூஸ்ஃபுல்லாக இருக்கும், அதுதான் எடுத்து பண்ணுவோம். தட்ஸ் த சயின்டிஸ்ட் அப்ரோச் ஆல்சோ. நெக்ஸ்ட், soul. The Buddha explicitly rejected the idea of an eternal, unchanging soul. He called it self or Atman. That is, the Sanskrit word is Atman, which is central to many religions, including Hinduism, and has fostered many a superstition. Hinduism, like every individual is supposed to have an Atman or soul, which is unchanging and eternal. நீங்கள் இறந்து போனதுக்கப்புறம் that soul will go somewhere else. It will take rebirth somewhere else. This is even Christianity has got this concept of soul. Islam has got the concept of soul. But Buddha said, no, there is nothing like a soul. And he came up with a funda called Anatta. Instead, he proposed the concept of Anatta, non-self or Anatman. Anatman is the opposite of Atman. Hinduism, the idea of moksha is when your Atman merges with the Paramatma, then you are supposed to achieve moksha. Buddha said, Atma-ngirade kadayad, soul-ngirade kadayad. And the soul is not permanent, soul is not, unchanging. He gave two examples. First is simile of the chariot. The chariot is not an entity, but a collection of parts which are periodically replaced. Chariot or better, you can give the example of today's motor car. A motor car moves. A motor car is a collection of various parts. நீங்கள் கீ திருப்பினீங்கன்னா motor car starts. That doesn't mean the motor car has a soul. Computer, it's a collection of parts. You can't say that computer has a soul. So Buddha said even the human body is like that. It's a collection of parts, physical parts, mentally when they all come together in a certain way, then life, consciousness emerges. There is nothing called a soul. Or particular இடத்துல soul இருக்குங்கிறதெல்லாம் தப்பு. So you can notice this is the current scientific conception of human body also. I mean, science has not been, a lot of people have searched for the soul, they have just not been able to do it. Some people have even measured dead bodies. சாகிறதுக்கு முன்னால் சத்ததுக்கு அப்புறம் வெயிட் பார்த்து ஏதாவது குறையுதான்னு கூட பார்த்துருக்காங்க. இந்த நோட் இது. Next, so Buddha, the chariot is not an entity but a collection of parts which are periodically replaced. நம்ம பாடி கூட நீங்கள் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா every skin cells எல்லாம் every 2 weeks they are replaced. Something else every 9 weeks replaced. So the whole, இப்போ நீங்கள் இருக்கிற உங்கள் பாடியில் இருக்கிற செல்ஸு they were not there 10 years ago. They are entirely new cells. ஆனால் நீங்கள் you are still the same person. So there is an illusion of soul. There is nothing like soulங்கிறது புத்தா அப்போவே சொல்லியிருக்கார். 2500 years முன்னாலே சொல்லியிருக்கார். This aligns with the scientific view that the body is a collection of cells and systems that constantly regenerate and that identity emerges from the interplay of bodily and mental processes. Next, the simile of the flame. A flame does not have an independent existence but depends on fuel, wind and other conditions. The Buddha said, likewise, consciousness is a process rather than an entity and arises from causes and conditions. He said, body பார்ட்ஸு இதெல்லாம் இருந்தப்போ சில கண்டிஷன்ஸ் ஃபுல்ஃபில் ஆனால் கான்ஷியஸ்னஸ் எமர்ஜஸ். இட்ஸ் கால்ட் அன் எமர்ஜென்ட் ப்ராப்பர்ட்டி. இட் எமர்ஜஸ் ஃப்ரம் சர்டன் திங்ஸ். ஸோ தேர் நத்திங் லைக் எ சோல். எப்படி ஒரு ஃப்ளேமு எப்படி வருதோ அதே மாதிரி கான்ஷியஸ்னஸ் இஸ் ஆல்சோ லைக் எ ஃப்ளேம். This aligns with the scientific view that consciousness emerges from neural networks and brain processes, not from a singular location or soul. Thus, the Buddha's concept of Anatta, Anatta means no soul or no self, prefigures modern scientific insights into the human body and mind. Both frameworks emphasize impermanence, interdependence, and the absence of a central unchanging controller or soul. The last point, the Buddha on rituals, superstitions, and miracles. There is a sutra called Aggana Sutra. It's a very important sutra, everybody should know. The Buddha said all humans are fundamentally equal. இந்த மேலே கீழே உயர் ஜாதி கீழ் ஜாதி இதெல்லாம் கிடையாது. ஆல் ஹியூமன் பீயிங்ஸ் ஆர் ஃபண்டமெண்டல். இமேஜின் திஸ் இஸ் த திங் வாட் வி ஆர் சேயிங் நவ், பட் புத்தா செட் இட் இன் 2500 and he gave this example. Regardless of caste and lineage, he debunked the idea that one's social status or success in life is determined by one's birth into a specific caste. He said, நீ உயர் ஜாதியில் பிறந்தனால நீ பெரிய ஆள், இல்லாட்டி நீ ஒரு ரிச்சுவல் பண்ணுறதுனால நீ நல்லவனுங்கிறதெல்லாம் கிடையாது அப்படின்னு he says. What truly matters are one's actions, ethical living and meditation. Nowadays we say the thing, we are not bothered about which caste you are born in. If you are a good man, we respect you. If you are a capable man, we respect you. So Buddha said the same thing in those days. He taught that rituals if devoid of understanding or inner transformation were futile. The religion he preached was egalitarian. It was a radical departure from the prevailing Brahminical orthodoxy and resonated strongly with people from all castes. It continues to inspire movements for equality and social justice in modern India. So many people don't know this, that Aggana Sutra is something everybody should read. Everybody interested in social justice should read that, because அந்த காலத்திலே இவர் அந்த பாயிண்ட் எல்லாம் கிளியராக சொல்லியிருக்காரு. Now you'll be surprised to know, நம்ம ஆஸ்ட்ராலஜி பற்றி நிறைய பேசணும், கிண்டல் பண்ணோம். See what Buddha said about astrology in those days. Buddha said, stargazing and astrology, forecasting lucky or unlucky events by science, prognosticating good or evil, all these things are forbidden. In fact, Swami Vivekananda also said the same thing, astrology is crap. Chanakya has also said the same thing, astrology is crap. And there are a lot of scientific arguments. I don't want to go into that because this lecture is not meant to be astrology. But if there is one takeaway from this lecture, if you stop believing in astrology from today, I will consider myself gratified. Buddha also preached a religion free from the supernatural, magic and miracles. He said, by this you shall know that a man is not my disciple, that he tries to work a miracle. இந்த மிராக்கிள் பண்ணுறவெல்லாம் கொஞ்சம் கெட்ட வார்த்தை வருது. ஸோ அவனை நம்பாதீங்க அப்படின்னு புத்தா சொல்கிறேன். Unlike other religions which teach that success in life is not possible without God's grace, Buddha asks us to work out our own salvation with due diligence. So you notice, I've just given 4 examples because now let me conclude my speech. It should be a matter of great pride to Indians that the English philosopher and Nobel laureate Bertrand Russell called Buddha the greatest figure in the whole of human history. So Bertrand Russell said, உலக ஹிஸ்ட்ரியிலேயே த கிரேட்டஸ்ட் மேன் யாருன்னு சொன்னால் புத்தா. He said, Second greatest man is Socrates, and third greatest man is Jesus Christ. Though he was a Christian himself, he said Buddha number 1, Socrates number 2. Of course, avaroda ranking, but definitely Buddha was one of the greatest men. He praised Buddhism for its practical, non-theistic and non-dogmatic approach, and considered it to be superior to Christianity in terms of moral and philosophical depth. Albert Einstein is credited with the remark, if there is any religion that would cope with modern scientific needs, it would be Buddhism. Einstein said the only religion which is compatible with modern science, whose ideas and concepts are in tune with modern science, is Buddhism. வேறு எந்த ரிலிஜனும் கிடையாது. ஆனால் எல்லாருமே சொல்லிட்டு இருப்பானுங்க, இப்போ ஒரு ஸ்டாண்டர்டாக ஒன்று ஆரம்பிச்சிருச்சு, எங்கள் முன்னோர்கள் அப்போயே கண்டுபிடிச்சாங்க அப்படின்னு சொல்லி ஒன்று ஆரம்பிச்சிருச்சு. According to Huston Smith, he is a famous scholar of world religions, Buddhism speaks not to a particular people but the human condition. He called Buddhism a universal religion. He regarded it as one of the most rational, practical and compassionate spiritual traditions that is relevant across cultures and time. He stated that Buddhism appeals to modern seekers because it prioritizes experience over dogma, encourages critical thinking and provides tools for self-transformation without reliance on external authority or divine intervention. He said, நீ இம்ப்ரூவ் பண்ணுறதால நீயே பண்ணிக்கணும். No priests are necessary, no others are necessary. You should improve by yourself. It's a cruel irony, I would say it's a kind of tragic comedy, that India, the land of the Buddha, who prescribed a religion that emphasized empirical observation and critical thinking more than 2,500 years ago. India, the land of Jawaharlal Nehru, who coined the term scientific temper. And India, the only country in the world whose constitution makes it a fundamental duty of all citizens to develop the scientific temper, is plagued with all sorts of superstitions and religious obscurantism even today. Scientific temper, I already told you, is crucial for India's progress as it promotes evidence-based decision-making and rational thinking at both individual and state levels. India cannot hope to become a superpower or global power if it cannot achieve scientific and technological excellence, build a prosperous, sustainable and harmonious future, and emerge as a global leader unless it promotes scientific temper. Thank you.
உன் கடவுளை விட, உன் சாஸ்திரத்தை விட, உன் முன்னோரை விட, உன் வெங்காயம் விளக்கமாத்தை விட உன் அறிவு பெருசு, அதை சிந்தி.